Hey guys, so this week I read chapters 6 and 7 of Multicultural Education of Pluralistic Society, and these chapters really just focused on how we perceive others. It looked at how we view people that come into the classroom or just come into our life with disabilities, whether they be above or below the social norm, so exceptional children as well, and then how we view people who don't speak English or speak very little English or a variation of English like Ebonics. How do you view those people within the classroom or just in general as a person? And that's what this week focused on. So I'm going to talk to you guys about three things today. Okay, those are exceptional children, people that are below or above the social norm. And then I'm going to talk about bilingualism. Okay, and we will also be talking about the transition plan, which is a pretty cool thing that came into place within schools within the IDEA Act. And so if you haven't heard of the IDEA Act, check it out. It's definitely a great thing to have happened within the educational system. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is exceptional children, people that are above or below the social norm. How do we view them? So if you have a kid that comes into your classroom and is below the social norm, what would you do in that instance? Like, how would you view him? How would you try to take measures to meet his needs? Would you either comfort him too much, coddle him too much, or would you just allow him to be on his own? I think there's a fine line of what we should do as teachers within the classroom, right? So if you have a student with disabilities, you have somebody with special needs, or even an exceptional student, I don't think that you should spend a lot of time specifically catered to that student. I think that you should spend more time catered to that student than you normally would, but I don't think you should spend an exceptional amount of time. And then same for kids that are above the norm. If kids are above the norm, I don't think that you should send them out on their own and let them do a lot of work. Like, here's a lot of busy work, here's more work. And I see that happening a lot within school. If you're above the social norm, I see you get more, I've seen teachers give out more work, more busy work. I've seen them just let them wear their headphones in class after they finish, so jam out and not listen to anybody else. I've seen a lot of things happen. And then people that are below the social norm, I've seen teachers do things such as coddle the kids or just put them in a group with just kids with special needs. And within the regular classroom environment, just that group. So if there's multiple IEPs, why don't you all get in a group together and I'll sit down and read you this stuff and we'll figure this out together. I think that there can be better uses of your time and better things that you can do for those kids, because they still need that social aspect. They need to be learning with other kids as well, not just from you and your point of view and your perspective and your answers. They need to hear from other kids and start to figure things out. And I think that's a vital part of an educational experience. It's something that they should experience themselves. Exceptional kids, I would, in my classroom, in my idealistic classroom, I would pair them up with kids that are below the norm, if I have any IEPs, and then also have some kids that are just okay in class and pair them all up, allow them to see and hear different perspectives and give them different leadership roles so everybody participates. In this way, people grow and cognitively, and they're able to think on their own, they're able to think critically and try to transition them from a logical way of thinking to a more abstract way of thinking. And I think that would be a great thing to do within schools. All right, so that was my first rant about what this book brought up and things that I've seen personally within the school system. The second thing that I'm going to be talking to you guys about is not actually going to be bilingualism. We'll say that to the end. We're going to talk a little bit more about the transitional plan. So the transitional plan, I heard, was just a plan that once you're 16, if you have an IEP, preparing kids for the future, for what's after college. Well, personally, I think this is a plan that should be constantly carried out throughout the 4 years that they're in high school or more. or even less. I think that the transitional plan, preparing them for what's after high school, is a thing that they need to be constantly thinking about, kind of planning for, figuring out what they want, what they think they can accomplish. They should constantly be thinking about this and setting goals for themselves. So I do think that a transitional plan, especially in certain cases, is definitely needed, and sit down with the parent and figure things out. But I also think that the student needs to be thinking about that throughout his or her educational experience. So from the very start, what am I going to do after school? Am I going to, become a lawyer? Am I going to go to school and, get an engineering degree? What am I going to do? Am I going to become a dolphin trainer? Am I going to not go to school and work? Where can I get a job that would hire me without college experience? Also, such things as like get them thinking about different avenues that they can take. Can I join the military? Can I join up with the Marines, or something else, get them thinking. They should be constantly thinking about this. So the transitional plan shouldn't just be happening at the age of 16, trying to get them to figure out what they want to do with the rest of their life. That should be a constant development, constant thought, and it even occurs outside of your educational experience. So out of college or out of high school, you're constantly thinking about, man, I got this and this done, but what am I going to do with all that? And you think you need to constantly be thinking about that kind of stuff. All right, and the last thing, this was more in chapter 7 of the book. Those two were more in chapter 6. This is in chapter 7, was bilingualism or monolingualism. So that's where you only speak one language. Or even just, like a derivative of English. Okay, it talks about all those different things within the chapter. Something that I've heard in the past that has been done is when somebody comes in that's bilingual, and these are past studies, so we now know that those weren't true, but studies have been, in the past, were said to be proven that people who were bilingual had a disadvantage within an English school because they didn't know the language as well, and if they didn't know the language as well, they weren't going to learn the different parts of the different components that make up an education better, because they aren't going to understand the English language, which is what the teachers will be speaking. So everybody thought that was true. Well, recent studies have found that people who are bilinguals actually learn at a faster rate. They're better able to understand English, and they're able to think on higher cognitive levels. So they're able to think and solve problems a lot quicker. Abstract thinking, critical thinking. Yeah, they're able to do all that better than people who only speak one language. So that was proven to be false. And also kids who speak like Ebonics, or they're from Boston, speak different things, or speak English different. Okay, kids that do that are perfectly normal, perfectly fine. I don't think that there should be any judgment. And I think that there is judgment within schools. So if a kid comes in and speaks Ebonics, or is from the ghetto, or from the inner city, speaks English a little bit different, you may already have a preconceived notion that, they're not going to try hard, or they don't know a lot, or they're not very smart. Right? Now, that's not a solid way of thinking. That is not a good way of thinking at all. Okay, those kids are very smart and intelligent and can learn a lot. They're like sponges, like any other kid. It's how you do as a teacher that's really going to affect their education. So if you're judging them already, they'll probably do worse. But, so that's just my beef with current educators, is that oftentimes they can judge kids before they actually get to know them, and they lose that hope that every educator starts out with over time, that kids can learn, they can become better. And I think it's very important to hold on to and retain that hope that kids can actually grow. All right, so basically some things that I wanted to talk about were some things that can be improved upon within the educational experience, within schools. And I think one of them is judging. I do not think that teachers should be judgmental. If you're judging other kids, or even anybody in real life, in normal everyday life, if you're judging a normal person walking down the street, that person will guarantee surprise you. And same with those kids. You judge one of those kids, they're going to surprise you. So don't think that any kid can't do something. And you should be holding kids to high standards and get them to hold themselves to a higher standard. So that way they can increase their education and boost their own self-confidence and self-worth. All right? That's the very first thing that I think we can improve upon. Another one would be the kind of influence or getting kids that have disabilities or even bilingual into other groups, other social groups within the classroom. I think that you should pair up kids smart. Don't just pair them up just to pair them up, but pair up the kids that are able to think better critically with kids that can barely tell you what 2 plus 2 is. Pair them up. They'll learn, they'll grow, they'll develop, and they'll surprise you yet again. So I think that's very important, and they also need that social aspect. I mean, if you had a disability yourself, right? Let's say you had hearing loss, or you were blind in one eye, or something. I don't know, something like that. You have some kind of disability that prohibits you from functioning normally, right? Would you want to be kind of cast aside or an outcast or judged? Or would you want to be put in other groups with other kids and learn and joke around with them and have fun and develop yourself and have that experience? I think anybody would want to do that. And if you yourself actually had that disability that student had, put yourself in their shoes. Would you just want to be just doing work and with the teacher the whole time and people like, oh, yeah, he's special? No, I wouldn't want that at all. All right, so put yourself in their shoes a little bit. And that's what I think that I will definitely include within my own classroom, is putting myself in other kids' shoes. How would they feel? How would I feel if I were them? All right, and so kind of base how I'm going to educate them based on that. And then also, another thing that I would want to do within my classroom is try to get bilingual kids to, talk more with the other kids and get rid of that judgmental aspect. Okay, if a kid speaks another language, another kid may judge him, may be like, man, he's a Mexican, don't knock on somebody else's culture just because it's not yours. We talked about that the very first chapter, ethnocentrism. Don't fall into an ethnocentric point of view. Break free from that. All right. And one question that I would have that I really want to find out is, what is life like for these kids in the future, in their job, in their workforce? What is life like? And how can I better prepare them for that experience, for that part of life? All right, so that's basically everything that chapter 6 and 7 talked about. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.